Totally used to that. So a few things that I want to just hit on is I do free voluntary reading in lower levels and also upper levels. And I do think that with the upper levels, you kind of have to dress it up a little bit more, especially that's what I've noticed with my juniors and seniors. They have kind of like been through the school system. They're a little bit jaded sometimes. And so I really make an effort to make it exciting. And some of the ways that I do that is I introduce the novels to students, and I kind of do the same thing for my lower levels, but I just put like a little bit more effort into making sure that they are excited about reading because, again, they're older students and they kind of have that complex sometimes. We're going to talk about how to go beyond the surface and how to dig deeper. A lot of the novels that we have, like sometimes we think like, okay, reading is just for acquisition, but there are some really great novels and great themes that students can extrapolate from those books. And so that's kind of what I've learned to do in my class. And it has made our conversation much more rich. And it goes beyond like acquiring a language. Like we're actually talking about literature. We're talking sometimes at the same level, or we're talking in an interdisciplinary way, the same way that they would talk or discuss novels in an English class. And I like that because I feel like that gives my class a little bit more like validation. And also, I like to refer to myself as grade book queen because in my school, we actually have a rule that you have to have grades every 2 cycles. So we have a block scheduling system, and like every 2 classes, you need to have some type of assessment, some type of grade. And so one of the issues that I ran into, and the reason why I'm doing this is because when I would read with students, it was like, oh my gosh, it was sort of like this cafe mood, and we would just read and discuss, and it almost felt so philosophical, so ideal. But then later, I wouldn't have grades in grade book, and so I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to kind of maybe transition and figure out how I can assess students, but also have a great time and honor what we've learned about those language acquisition theories. So, first thing that you need to do is you need to stack your team. And that is just making sure that you have a robust library. And that's something that Teacher Discovery can help you with. Making sure you have a library with lots of different books. And when I say diverse, I'm not just saying like ethnically or racially diverse, although I do think that that is very important as well. I think you need different themes. And just different things because we're teaching different types of students, and I think with teachers, or at least I can speak from my experience, I tend to want to select books or have books that I would be interested in, and I just recognize that bias, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I really need to just open up. And even if there are novels out there that I'm like, I really wouldn't be interested in it, I know there is a student that novel can connect with. So I always like to make that point. Making sure that your novels demonstrate a variety of themes, including rich perspectives and, a plethora of interests. And I'm just going to show you a few of like my novels that have like different themes. And part of the reason of me writing these novels is because there was like an absence in our field at the time where there wasn't like novels like Las Sombras, which is really, it's like a sci-fi novel. And so, kids were sort of like really, interested in that. And even like having a book novels that have like short stories, like anthologies and things like that, that could also help. I do have a really short story that I remember that there was a teacher, there was a book out there, and this kind of emphasized my point of not selecting novels that like you would just be interested in, but there.
Oh no, now you have cut out for a moment.
Oh my gosh. And I had so many students read that
I'm
book.
so sorry to interrupt. You did blank out for a minute, so we missed the middle of that story where right
Oh, I
after you
did?
said, yeah, right after you said it
Oh
was a good
no.
example of
Okay.
a book.
What was the last thing here? Let's backtrack. What was the last thing you heard?
You were about to describe the book from the story that
Hmm.
a student could relate to.
Let's see. Let me just switch. I cannot hear you all.
Oh no.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen one more time. I just switched my internet, by the way.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah, let me see if that let's see if that helps. Okay, share
Okay, we've
my
all been there.
yes. Oh my gosh, I've been having the worst time. And by the way, I do not have AT&T. I do have T-Mobile, so I may have to clown them later.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I'm just trying to get to present. So weird. Oh gosh. All right, let me. So what are you seeing on my screen? Okay, I see what you see. I see what you're seeing now. For some reason, oh, here it is. Okay. All right, what was the last thing? Let's see. I'll just backtrack. What was the last thing you heard?
You were starting to tell the story of a specific book that a student
Oh,
really
great.
related to.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So long story short, a teacher didn't like the book and, kind of like made some comments about it. And I was like, oh, okay. Normally I do pay attention because sometimes they're them. I ended up not taking the book out of my library, and there were so many kids who loved the book. And again, it wasn't something that I would have chosen, but so that I just wanted to, kind of make that point. Also, you may want to have like several, copies, of the book if possible, because you may have a lot of different students who are interested in that book. All right, so I don't know how to get this out of the way. Yep, just did it. Okay, so introducing novels to the students. We're going to kind of get into like the brass tacks of like what I do in the class with my kids. A few things you need to keep in mind. Number one, reading habits in the L1. I think that we make the assumption because we're teachers and we're lifelong learners, and we like to read, that all kids like to read and that all kids have like equal access to books. And when you're introducing novels to students and you're asking like different questions, and I'll introduce you to some of those questions in the slide, I think this gives you a really good idea of where students are, and you can sort of guide them and direct them to like the book that's going to be comprehensible and compelling for them. Because what we don't want to do is students pick up on a difficult book and then they're just going to hate doing free voluntary reading. So I just wanted to kind of make that point. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little video. Hopefully you can hear it. A video of me introducing. Exciting, but after I introduced the book like this, I feel like kids were like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to like grab a book from the library. And sometimes that isn't always the case, okay? So they do what I say sometimes, like to get a book. So here is the short video.
But to make matters es un libro worse, misterioso. Done. Kate is.
I'm going to show this one first. This is with one of my books, Las apariencias engañan.
Como de misterio. Oh, pero ¿por qué de misterio? ¿Qué vemos aquí? ¿Por qué de misterio? Sí. La imagen, ¿verdad? Con la mujer con una máscara. ¿Y por qué tiene una máscara? ¿Por qué tiene una máscara? Vamos a hacer unas predicciones. ¿Por qué tiene una máscara? ¿Qué? Porque tiene gafas. She has sunglasses. Oh, clase. Tiene una máscara porque tiene secretos. Y aquí dice, todos tenemos secretos, ¿no? No solamente ella, pero todos tenemos secretos. Okay.
All right, and that was the introduction to that book. Now, the other book that I'm introducing, interestingly enough, it is a book that I normally use for like my level 1 or 2, but this book is the story and the reaction that I got from students made me kind of include it with the books that I normally allow them to choose.
It soon discovers that the person, but to make matters worse, dun dun dun, Kate soon discovers that the person who brought down the plane may still be on the island with them.
Okay. Introducing these books to the kids and kind of, garnering, trying to figure out what their interest level is, and just the presentation in general, I found that they were a little bit more excited, they were curious. And then like I kind of honestly didn't want to stop. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go for another book, because they were just so, I don't know, just it created so much laughter and community. So that would be my first step. Okay. Digging deeper. So making reading kind of like authentic and real. And one of the reasons why I kind of I started bringing in the social aspect of reading is because I myself was a part of a book club. I used to lead a book club. We would read books in the comprehensible input community. It's like about reading, and kind of like that can seem like an isolated sort of event, but I've realized that when students read, a lot of times they want to talk about what they're reading, and I want to hear their ideas, and I want to hear what they have to say, and I also need to get a grade. So that's my other reason for bringing it or making it a little bit more social. So I do the first step in doing that is I do ask a lot of questions about their reading habits, and embedded in those questions, and you'll see them on the next slide, embedded in those questions are actually the vocabulary words that they're going to be using to discuss their books. So they're hearing words like personaje, protagonista, conflicto, villano. And that's sort of a nice little sneaky way to introduce the vocabulary in a contextualized manner. But also, I do activities with cognates. We talk about what do you think this word means? And it's just kind of like building or accessing those skills from the beginning. We also make predictions about the book. So they have their individual books. Kelsey, how am I doing on time?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't find the mute. You're doing pretty well. Our next session is at 7:30. So maybe, if we just have about a 5-minute break, we should be fine.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because I'm always at the end. Okay.
Or I'm sorry, it's at 7. My apologies.
Oh, no problem.
So about 15 more minutes.
Okay, good. Okay, I can slow down. So I like to sort of embed that vocabulary and talk about a lot of these things sort of up front. And one of my reasons for doing that is because of this idea of shared background knowledge. We don't want to assume that students know these things. I used to make that assumption because, they have English class, and it's weird because when we start talking about themes in the book, a lot of students were mistaking theme for tone. So this gave me an opportunity to just like reteach and create that shared background knowledge, so we all are kind of on the same level playing field, and no one, if someone had gaps or whatever, those gaps were kind of filled in. I mentioned making predictions about the book, and this is where I'm tying things into grammar. So if it's upper levels, we're making predictions, we're using the future tense. I don't hide the grammar that I'm teaching students. I just make it as natural as possible. And again, this is them, learning this important language structure, but also using it in a very natural and accessible way. And also doing, the questions and the talk and all of this sort of like pre-game or pre-show activities. It really does help to build community in the class. And this is probably, I do this as a free voluntary reading because this is my way of modeling what they're going to be doing when they're reading on their own later in the year. So I do this first as a unit, and then later they kind of already the ritual and the routines have already sort of been grounded. They know what's next. All right, so here's some, this is sort of PQA, personal question activity, but also a survey. And I just ask them some questions, ask them questions about the book. When I do these questions, I have them on, I don't have them all together. I have maybe 2 or 3 questions per slide. And I have students think about the question first, okay? They can, jot down the answer. And then after, they'll circulate around the class, and then they'll talk about, they'll talk about the questions, and then we'll talk about these questions sort of as a class. And again, I am going to mention, grades. I do like focused grading sometimes, which means I am just looking for elaboration. I am looking for you to elaborate on your response. I'm looking for you to maybe use vocabulary words that we've talked about already. And I am looking for circumlocution. So if you don't know a word, your ability to be resourceful and think about the words you do know so that you can, show up in these conversations. So these are just some of the questions every year I maybe add or switch some out. Here in the beginning, I didn't have anything about digital books, but because I am now a big Kindle reader, that's something that I ask. This is information about their reading habits. So if I have a student that's like, I hate reading, I haven't read a book in years, then I know that once we start, once they have an opportunity to select their books, I may guide them to something that is more of kind of a little bit more low key for them. Okay, I'm not going to introduce them to the house on Mango Street, especially in Spanish. So these are just some of the questions that I ask, and I feel like depending on your students, you can always modify, but this is always a great activity because it helps them to think about their reading habits. It gets them speaking in a target language. You're introducing vocabulary words like género, right? Novelas gráficas, ciencia ficción. So you're introducing these cognates, you're introducing this vocabulary, and you're getting a sense, sort of this profile, this reading profile about your student. Next, and this is sort of we're kind of nearing the end. One of my favorite things to do with the upper level students is to talk about, write and discuss the themes in the book. Now, before we do that, as I'm explaining sort of my process, I do want to mention that this is not something that I do all in one day. Okay, so this is something that I'm doing over the course of a month. So we have block scheduling. So we're doing the pre-reading activities. Then the students are choosing their books. Then they get together with a partner and they share about why they chose their book. So they're kind of doing like a reverse picture talk, why they chose their book. They get to tell me why they chose their book. So there's a lot, there are a lot of activities in between. So I don't want to give the impression that they get the books and boom. Now, once we get to themes, what I like to do is I like to make a list with the students. So collaboratively, we make a list of themes from movies and books. And this is really great because now they have a list of themes that they can kind of pull from. And as they're reading, they can sort of identify those things. So they talk about them, and then I normally give them some type of activity where they list the theme, and then they give me a few examples from the novel that actually support that theme. Okay, so that's one of my big activities that we do. And at the end, when we have our conversation talk, a conversation circle, all this comes full circle. So they talk about the characters, they talk about themes, compare and contrast characters, also character to self. That's another big one. Like, how are you different from this character? Also, hypotheticals, that is like my favorite. And so with the hypotheticals, now this is kind of for my advanced students. So when I'm doing this like in level 4, and we're talking about the conditional, we're talking about the past subjunctive, I do require, if we're in this unit and we work through how to actually think about the content of a novel and say what you would have done given that same set of circumstances. So that's something that's really big, and we do lots of practice. Okay, so I may have some prompts on the board. I may have like some pictures. We may see like little videos, little videos of things going awry, and then I'm like, what would you have done in this situation? So all this time I'm giving them the practice so that once they finish their book, they can actually apply these skills. My favorite question that I always get really great responses is, would you hang out with the main character? Why or why not? And I always get like these really kind of over the top responses from students. So some of these activities, a lot of them start off as writing activities, and then they morph into speaking activities, because I do believe that writing is a catalyst, for speaking. And then, to top it off, we
really quickly, I'm so sorry. There was a question in the chat. Do you model the skill you're teaching, like theme, for the students using a different book than what they chose? Or is it more like a mini lesson and then the students go read their own book and practice that skill?
Okay, so I would say both, because what I forgot to mention is I normally do a little mini book talk on a book that I'm currently reading. If it's a Spanish language book that I'm currently reading, I'll do kind of like a little book talk as well. Not necessarily at the beginning, but I'll do it so that students can kind of get a sense of like how to use, how to use the vocabulary and how to identify things. This last time that I did it, I did have like a mini lesson. We talked about the difference between theme and tone, because I noticed that a lot of kids were using tone as theme. So yeah, I guess it depends on what my students need. So that's not always the case. When I did this same unit a couple years ago, and the kids, they didn't need any help on that. And to be honest with you, I think it was because we used to watch El Internado and we would talk about the themes all the time in El Internado. So by the time we did this activity or this unit, they had that sort of running through their blood already.
Oh no, now we've cut out again. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no.
There we go.
I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. What?
Sorry,
Okay,
you had just finished answering the question. I think we heard everything that you had
okay.
said.
Yeah. I finished and then I just took a
Oh.
little pause.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So yeah, so everything sort of culminates in a conversation circle. And in this conversation circle, students, they get to choose their groups. Some students, they choose the same book and they want to discuss it, but a lot of times they have different books. And the purpose of the conversation circle is, there's 4 of us. I normally take them outside of class. I have like a little table, and they discuss their books, and then they listen and they ask questions of their peers. So they ask about, like, when they're discussing their book, their peers are asking them questions too, like, well, what's the theme? What did you think about this? And I do little training sessions, I guess you can call it, where we do mock conversation circles. And I model for them and show them what discriminative listening looks like. So now even when we have presentations, when they're listening to their classmates, they're writing things down. They're capturing things so that they can later ask good questions. And I think that really helps them to like pay attention, and really become more invested. Another thing that's a side note, but I think it's small, but it's so big in my class now. I do teach rejoinders. And so like that's one thing that I do require as they're listening. They have to use an appropriate rejoinder. So if somebody, they have to say, ay, qué interesante. If they're like, oh yeah, in this book, the dog died, it's like, ay, qué triste, So we, I do that to kind of help the interaction, and help them to stay focused. Now, I say that it's small, but also big, because now they can't stop using rejoinders. They use them all the time now. Whenever we watch a series, they're just like, no lo creo, So I always think that's a good sort of added bonus. So some of the things that they talk about why they chose the book. They talk about the overarching themes of the book. They give examples of those themes. They talk about their favorite part, their least favorite part, if they would recommend the book. So the conversation circles don't necessarily like encompass everything that we've like done during the duration of the reading, but it is a really great opportunity for them to sort of like, vocalize their opinion about the book. And what I love about this is they pick up so much vocabulary and they're better able to like express themselves, and they're just excited to like talk about their book, so.
And we're at about 5 minutes left, just so you know.
If anybody has any questions. Kelsey, I'll just hum so you know that I'm like here. Okay?
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to, jump on it at the minute.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
Yeah, just want to make sure. And I'm going to
Okay.
go ahead and share the slideshow in the chat. I also shared a couple of links to follow AC on Instagram, as well as her blog and website. So definitely give her a follow. And then we did have a question here in the chat. When you mentioned needing grades, were you talking about the conversation circles?
Okay, so the grades encompass, you can pretty much figure out what you want to do at whatever point. So there's the conversation circle is sort of like the summative assessment, but there are a lot of little formative assessments. So for example, like just tell me why you chose this book. That can be a mini assessment. That can be a writing, that can be a speaking. Also, what's another one we've done? Oh, tell me about like the characters, like describe the characters, describe like what the conflict is in the book, describe the themes. So at some point, I may not like assess like all of those, but I always try, because we have 90 minutes, always try to have some proof or evidence of something that the students have done. I just kind of pull from there. And I normally use like rubrics. I'll have like I'll have my focus rubric where I'll tell them like, I'm not really paying attention to grammar right now. I just want you to elaborate. And then at the end, that's kind of when like I look at all the different categories that I've assessed, and it's like this one big rubric where I am looking at all these different aspects of your performance. And Kelsey, by the way, there was one little typo on the presentation. So if you want, I'm gonna just go into Canva and I'll re-download it and I'll send it to you again so you can send out to people.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. We'll
Last minute.
Yeah. But yes, thank you so much. That was really fun to see the videos and how you apply this in the classroom. So we definitely appreciate you